He told her to be simple. He told her not to draw attention. It was a precise instruction, clipped the way he gave orders, one syllable at a time, measured, like a weapon he polished and kept on the shelf. He was wrong. Peter Moretti stands at the top of his private stairwell and watches the whole room tilt toward her. For 2 years, Sarah Jenkins has been the steady clockwork inside his empire. The person who booked the flights, who smelled trouble in invoices before anyone else did, who knew every name, every pattern, every soft underbelly of his businesses. She has been invisible by design, efficient, unimposing, unremarked upon. That is how she survived in his world, and it is how she kept him safe. Tonight, survival and safety outline themselves in crimson silk. Rain has been washing the city for hours, turning the glass at his penthouse into mirrors of motion. From his desk by the window, Peter sees the city as angles and value, territories, lines of credit, loyalties measured in people and favors. His life is ordered by need and control. Its pleasures are measured and parceled. He knows the language of leverage as intimately as he knows the grooves of the ring on his finger, the small ritual twist he performs when calculation metastasizes into feeling. That twist is a glove he keeps on habitually. It keeps his mind from slipping. It reminds him he belongs to the business first, to anything else second. Sarah has been part of the apparatus for 24 months. 2 years of taking messages, remembering the smallest fact about a client's allergies, the way a particular supplier likes to be greeted, which henchman answers to which nickname. She knows Peter's coffee order down to the hazelnut latte that sustains his mornings. She knows to place his jacket on the back of the chair when he forgets. Nobody notices her, because that is how she is trained to be noticed, by not being noticed. So when Nikolai Volov arrives in an expensive, impatient storm, Volov with suits heavy as promises and a hunger built on old debts, Peter is unsettled. Nikolai wants more than terms. He wants respect. To him, that respect must be visible, a currency as raw as the money he brings. He must have a companion, Nikolai says through the interpreter of his translator, a man with a scar that mars his cheek like a second truth. He means spectacle. Peter's first answer is an order. "Bring me someone simple," he says into the room. His voice is a blade. "No attention. Sit, smile. You will be invisible." Sarah hears the command the way she always does, as instruction to obey, because obedience is what keeps her seat. But something has shifted. The way a person measures their invisible years is by the small rebellions they allow themselves. The thought that she could be simple doesn't interest her. Simplicity has been a suit she put on for others, not herself. For the first time, the possibility that she could be present and not erased wedges under her ribs and refuses to be pushed aside. She volunteers. It is not a moment of cowardly desire. She volunteers because she knows the contracts and the case files on the 4th shelf, because she knows that Vulov's lawyer has misfiled Claw 17, because she knows that Nikolai's eldest daughter cannot breathe near certain florals. She volunteers because this is not merely attendance. It is an opening. Her voice is steady when she says, "I'll go." Peter meets that voice with a look like a judge weighing appeal. He cannot be sure. She is part of his machinery. He is used to keeping parts in their place. But there is a practical man in him who recognizes potential as a tool. He gives instructions precise and small. Arrive early, sit to my left, do not engage unless I signal, carry the file with the red tab. He says it like a man who can order the weather. She nods and folds the instruction into her control. When she opens her locker the next morning, she feels as if she is taking off a life and stepping into another. The gray cardigan she wears in the office seems to blur against the hum of fluorescent light, a protective cloak of forgetfulness she can remove without risk. She calls Maria, her cousin and a seamstress of small miracles, and arranges a late afternoon pickup. There is a language to transformation, one learned by women who practice it as armor. It is not about becoming someone new. It is about allowing pieces of yourself to be recognized, to animate, to walk forward. Peter watches all of this the way he watches a chessboard. He thinks briefly that a woman's appearance is a matter of taste. He underestimates the effect. He thinks she will be pretty enough to placate Nikolai's need for front. He underestimates everything, except the thing he cannot name that hits him when he sees her from the stairwell. The dress is red the way the city keeps blood in its ledger. It is silk that swallows the light and gives it back as a promise.
It fits her in a way that does not demand attention for its tightness, but rather demands attention for its certainty. Confident cut at the waist, a shoulder bare in a careful and strategic way, a neckline that speaks only when the room listens. Her hair is down, a surrender she usually reserves for nights that belong to nobody. She chooses a ruby necklace, a history lesson of a single garnet, because it matches the language of the business in a way the world understands. Sandalwood perfume footprints someone has left in the hallway. Louder are the heels that count out her approach. She removes her glasses in the apartment entryway, a movement that feels ritual, like taking off a uniform and stepping into a role she's built for herself. The glasses have been her shield. They said, "Do not look close enough to see me."
Without them, there is an exposure she doesn't regret. She looks in the hall's antique mirror and sees someone who will not be invisible tonight. Peter's attention goes taut the moment she steps into the foyer and turns to the stair. He had expected the gray cardigan. Instead, a shard of crimson slides down the steps. He freezes, a statue mid-breath. His ring twist stops because something has hooked under his skin that makes calculation turn to heat. The room tilts. Every surface seems to bend into focus around her. The freeze is not merely a physical pause. It is a cognitive collapse, a life of assumptions rebuked in one descent. People in the mezzanine move, glasses lift, conversations falter. Eyes are drawn like pull strings. Nikolai watches with the slow opening of a predator who senses blood. Lavinia Vance, stationed like a decorative threat at the foot of the stairs, fixes a smile that is a challenge. Lavinia has cultivated her role as Peter's social satisfaction, a woman threaded into the city's soft currency of status. She meant to be the spectacle. She meant to take the spotlight. Sarah reaches the bottom of the stairs and steps into the room like someone who has rehearsed this entrance on the inside for months. Her posture says nothing of stage fright. It says, yes, take note. She has carried the red tap file tucked under her arm like a justified weapon. Peter remains at the top of the stairs, an immovable silhouette of tailoring and restraint. He watches as the room swallows and then stares back. When she speaks Russian at the table, the language falls like a sheet across two opposing forces. It is precise, it is flat. It punctures the arrogance in Nikolai's chest because it reveals that she understands more than he's supposed to believe. He expected someone ornamental. He did not expect someone who could name the terms of his own company's liabilities, who could cite an email chain and a mark that proves his subsidiary owes Peter more than his pride allows. The atmosphere shifts. Conversation that smelled like pretense now tastes urgent. Sarah has a dossier, red tap, that Peter handed her out of habit, not understanding its contents as she did. He had wanted someone to carry the documents. She intended to carry the room. She slides facts into the conversation the way a surgeon's hand finds soft places, steady, unspectacular, and deadly in efficacy. She answers a pointed question with an offhand detail about Fulov's daughter's allergies to specific floral oils. Nikolai's focus screws outward for a moment. Family is his weakness, and she moves a small hand over the table as if nothing. It is a precise, irreverent insult delivered as awareness. His jaw tightens. His translator's voice shifts to a clipped defense. The hum of the room is no longer the same. Camera phones lift. The restaurant's chandeliers throw brittle light onto polished knives. Peter notices simultaneously that the table has changed shape.
He sees Sarah directing attention with small gestures, the way a conductor shapes a swell. He is not used to being outmaneuvered in public. That he is watching himself become something softer, jealous, protective, is the thing that makes him most dangerous. Sarah does not flirt for effect. She is not performative with her body. She is precise with her mind. An insult is parried by a correction. A false assumption about terms is corrected with dates and signatures. She speaks in legalese where it matters, and in Russian where it breaks the cadence of arrogance. She draws out lines of the contract that show a penalty clause Nikolai had hoped to hide, unpacks an invoice that proves his subsidiary's leverage is built on air. In front of him, his bargaining position dissolves. He hits back the way he always hits back, with a remark that leans on old violence. Peter keeps the room between them. He orders succinctly that the terms be redrawn. He places his hand on the table like a stake. Over the edge of his palm, Sarah lets him take the center, but she keeps the instrument of the victory. She directs the conversation where he wants it and where she needs it to be. The result is a better contract, better terms, with consequences for Nikolai's ego. Nikolai rakes a look at her, humiliation and a slow, bearing hatred. At a later point in the meal, with plates cleared and the hum of conversation returning, Peter slides his hand down to the small of Sarah's back. It is a maneuver disguised as patronage, but it is more. The ownership in the gesture is more felt than seen. His fingers rest there for a count too long, a possession made of heat and a promise that says, "I have not lost you." She does not flinch.
She lets his fingers remain as if to answer a question that has been unspoken for years. He is not gentle exactly, he is decisive. She meets his gaze, and the exchange between them pulses with the knowledge of what each has done. She saved the deal, he kept the war going. There is tenderness redirected at the edges of their transaction. Lavinia tries a public whisper after the plates are removed, a designed knife meant to make spectacle of Sarah's audacity. Bold for a secretary, she says, her smile like a drawn blade. Peter's hand tightens again, the ring twist returns, but he does not have to answer. Sarah looks at Lavinia with an evenness that is a better weapon. I do more than answer the phone, she says. Her voice is calm. It contains the patience of someone who has seen the underside of power and refuses to be bought. Lavinia, used to men's quick defenses, misfires. The room takes notice of her misstep in real time. Gossip does not reward entitlement for long. When they leave the restaurant, black SUVs split the rain like a pair of loyalties arriving. The valet opens the door with minimal theater. Peter expects Sarah to sit on his left as instructed, a place in which she will present and not participate.
She instead closes the SUV door and slides into the seat beside him. His breath hitches, a small, private sound, because a rule he never enforced has been broken willingly. He does not say anything. He assesses. Inside the limo, the privacy partition slides with a soft hydraulic whisper. Darkness wraps them like a decision. For a city with so many noises, the stillness in the car feels like a secret. Peter turns toward Sarah. He is catching up to something that happened an hour ago, a pivot he did not expect to need to make. He says low, "You could have done damage." She meets his eyes clearer than the last time he saw them, when his instructions were kept like a covenant. I did the job. You were supposed to be quiet. I was supposed to be invisible, she corrects him. Peter, you told me to be simple. I just did the thing you actually needed. There is a truth in the sentence that knocks at the banality of his assumptions. He is not practiced in surprises that reveal his own blind spots. He twists his ring again. You could have been killed, he says, half protection, half accusation. The city is long. Those who step into his orbit produce a wake of enemies. She shrugs, a small human gesture that is almost indiscernible in the dim light. You would have handled the body count anyway, she says. The frankness is a bridge between them, and also a clear line. Her agency is a sword and a shield. He respects that. It was not your job, he says finally. It was, she replies. It was my job to make sure you came back to your desk with what you needed. He looks at her then, really looks, and something changes in the space where his rules reside. He realizes that his chart of loyalties has been incomplete. He has tended to bodies of men who will fight and bleed for him, but somehow he did not measure the depth of the woman who pressed the presses of his life. He feels something possessive and honest, not merely desire, but the tightening of a territory boundary, the impulse to arrange the world so that possession includes protection and respect. They drive back in a silence that is not emptiness. Outside, the city keeps moving. Inside, the satin and leather of the vehicle hold the heat they have generated like a small, dangerous greenhouse. Peter finally says, "Tomorrow, my office, 9. He gives her the time as if he is handing over a key. Sarah nods. She knows what it means. A summons to prove herself not as a shadow, but as a participant. She has wanted that invitation for years. But invitations from powerful men are ambivalent things. They can be advancement or entrapment. She decides to interpret it as an offer of influence. Tonight, she has proven competence. Tomorrow, she will show strategy. The morning after the dinner is not an epiphany. It is a rearrangement of furniture. The office hums with new patterns. Jessica, the reception desk, looks at her as if she has been reimagined. Whispers climb like smoke. The 2-year baseline of her invisibility has left a scent. Some people sniff and find their world has shifted. In the elevator, Sarah stands beside Peter, shoulder to shoulder, and the fact of their proximity in a public vertical box is a statement. She meets staff eyes with the small, equal nod that says, "I am here." Peter's people are practical. Miller, always at the door, does not openly condense into suspicion. He records. Rumors in their world do more than pass the time. They are instruments waiting to be honed. Lavinia watches them from across the corridor with the same calculation she uses for clothing choices. She is the first to speak when Peter's hands are otherwise occupied. "He didn't tell me this would be a change," she says, oddly pleading and wounded, as if a man's social decisions are hers to steward. Her voice is theatrical in the fluorescent light. Peter doesn't answer. He is watching Sarah.
He is watching how the office shifts to accommodate her presence. He likes it. The size of his like is both a pleasure and a threat. He has spent his life arranging people according to use. He did not expect affection to be an emergent property of necessity. In Peter's office, he sits behind the same wide desk that has been the seat of arbitration for a long while. The city spreads out behind him like a map of possible moves. He signals her to sit at the visitor's chair on his right. The chair is ordinary, wood polished smooth by 100 elbows meeting purpose. He slides a document folder across to her, the red tab again. It is a tacit acknowledgement of the night, the victory, the test, the opening. "You did well," he says at last, the compliment as measured as one of his ledgers. She replies not with modesty, but with the kind of clarity that has served her for 2 years. "I did what was needed." She lays out a brief catalog of the Vulov negotiation, the misfiled clause, the daughter's tendency toward specific allergies, the subsidiary's overstated assets. Each item is a small victory. Each item is a beta point on a ledger that has not been his alone. He has not yet decided what to do with the new information he carries, that he is startled by his own feeling, that someone in his orbit might challenge him not by a revolt but by illumination. He is used to force. Intelligence is a different kind of rebellion. He asked for simple. He received strategy and presence. The calculus is complicated. When the day stretches and the office pulses with the quiet of people at their tasks, there is a single shift that makes the room breathe. A young assistant, someone who used to exchange looks with Sarah and half forget her presence, brings a packet she was not meant to open and drops it on Peter's desk. It is addressed in a handwriting that tastes of arrogance. Senator Vance. The name pulls at a thread in Peter's mind.
Vance is everything Peter despises about public officials. The mixture of obligation and hypocrisy wrapped in a suit stitched by lobbyists. Peter reads the top line and thinks of Lavenia's easy smile, of entitlement, of leverage that can be used for joy or for revenge. He thinks of how political targets marry businessmen for mutual cover. He thinks of Senator Vance's potential to complicate a life that prefers to be uncomplicated. Sarah leans across the desk unbidden and reputable, eyes on the page. She reads a few lines, and color drains from her face. "He's been funneling funds through a shell company tied to the Volkov trade," she says slowly. Her knowledge is not surprising. She has an embarrassingly deep memory for ledgers. There is a USB wedged in the packet's fold, an ugly little flash drive that seems too thin for the weight it carries. The fact of its existence rewrites possibilities in the room like a dramatist's stage direction. Peter sets his jaw. The world of the city is never neat. It is a place where favors rot into demands. He is already considering outcomes, the way a man of his nature will. He thinks of leverage, of neutralizing threats via the quiet of blackmail or legal pressure. But he also thinks of the lesson of last night, that Sarah operates not out of adornment, but out of purpose. She has a mind that complements his. She is not merely a secretary to be elevated. She is, potentially, an ally. He will need allies. He is careful to note that alliances born of gratitude can easily become dependencies. He is not sentimental about loyalty. He is practical. Yet, the admission flutters. Perhaps there is a way to formalize what he had never known he needed. Outside, the city storms on. A black SUV idles at the curb like a patient gaze. The day yields small shifts. People under his employ rearrange their mental maps. In the elevator, whispers have teeth. Lavenia will not concede without a fight. There are always fights. The evening is already plotting a motion of its own. Peter closes his eyes for a second and feels the memory of his freeze, the slow ache when she first stepped into the space meant for display. The film of the stare, the red that ate the light, the way the room leaned. He tells himself it is only a reaction, a man not used to being surprised. Yet it is not merely surprise. It is a recognition that he does not like being surprised by someone he owns by professional measure. That sting, when it becomes a kind of fear, draws a line between what is acceptable and what is intolerable.
Sarah walks out into the hallway and around the glass atrium that houses his empire of offices. She is aware of the looks with the neat frisson she has learned to negotiate. The 2-year ledger of her life has given her patience. She knows what it means to wait for space to be carved out. She also knows how to take it with dignity. The USB in the packet feels like a live wire, a tool, a danger, a key.
She thinks not of romance, though there is clarity in the heat between them. She thinks of the chests of information she has mapped in her head. She thinks of the way men like Nikolai fold at the sight of a well-placed detail. She thinks of how senators like Vance hide behind policy while they bleed companies dry. She has never been one to stand on grand ideals. She has been one to manufacture evidence, to arrange the chessboard such that the opponent is boxed in by his own choices. There are consequences to all this. Peter knows that better than anyone. He also knows that to expose Senator Vance is to invite a war that will not be quiet. Political scandals have a way of detonating in the press. They pull relatives and ex-lovers with them, painting loyalists into patterns of suspicion. For all his money and influence, Peter understands that nothing about this will be easy. The city rewards the bold and crushes the careless. Tonight, the dinner sits in his memory as a pivot. A man who courts advantage in every relationship learned to be unsettled by a woman who was not his ornament. There is a growing sense in him that it is easier to keep what he wants if he names it. He will name it. He will call her into his office again and give her something that is both a promotion and a binding. Closer, more visible. The idea tastes like a plan. But the city is not docile. When a man elevates someone from shadow to light, he does not merely invite admiration, he invites predators. Nikolai is not a man who will be quietly humiliated. There are people back in Moscow and in the north who will read this loss as an insult that demands recovery. Lavinia will not disappear into her closet of defeated dresses. Senator Vance will not like the possibility of exposure. And Peter, who has learned to measure risk like currency, knows that the change he contemplates is an escalation. He studies Sarah in the corridor as she adjusts a file under her arm. He sees that she is contained and dangerous in a new way, a mind that has been polished by necessity. He thinks, with a strange territorial warmth, that he wants to keep her near enough to see what she will do next. He also knows that he wants to place her where others can see her, and thus claim her as his own, publicly. It is an old instinct. To guard is to mark is to prevent theft. He says nothing yet. For now, the office rearranges around the new reality, and the city waits with its teeth shown. The ledger of favors will update, the files will be filed, and the players will decide their next moves. Outside, night pins the rain to the pavement, and the penthouse lights blink like promises. Inside, 2 people who have spent years in different kinds of survival, one a life of visible power, the other the careful work of being unseen, stand at a new edge. He has frozen once already. He knows how that freeze changed him. It left him raw and awake. He knows he cannot afford to be frozen again.
He will not be, but neither will he be casual. This is the first ripple of something that will become a tide. For now, the balance hovers. A knock on the glass interrupts them. Miller's voice over the intercom, discreet, reporting a delivery and a tailing SUV that Patel, one of their drivers, has followed from the restaurant. Peter's jaw tightens. The city proves itself in small continuations. Threats do not sleep. Sarah looks up the window, at the smeared city, and at the ring on his finger. The ring is a muscle she knows how to provoke without breaking. She knows the dangers he faces, and she also knows the small contradictions of power, that sometimes the person with the most to lose is the most alive. "We can use this," she says softly, nodding to the packet on the table, to the USB on the desk. Peter turns to her, the man's face less an expression than a gait. He is still calculating whether to let her cross. The invitation to be near enough to do damage is a double-edged thing. She catches his look, that moment of weighing, and the city breathes a little harder. They will make a choice. The night will ask it of them. They will not be alone when enemies pick their teeth, waiting to see whose side the newest ally is on. The rain keeps falling. The city offers no applause, only the steady metabolism of lights and engines. Inside that glass room, the 2 stand at the beginning of a short list of consequences. A victory for a deal, a humiliation for a rival, the opening of a political wound.
The shape of what comes next is not yet laid down. It lingers as a promise and a danger. The packet sits between them like a small, dangerous animal, plastic folded over metal, the ugly little USB peeking from the paper as if it were ashamed of its usefulness. Peter's office has a way of sharpening moments. Light from the city carves the desk into matched planes, and even the air seems measured. He taps the corner of the folder once, twice, the motion habitual and controlling. Sarah watches his hands, as she has watched other hands for 2 years, teaching herself the gestures that tell you how a man will move when he is about to decide. "You know what this means," he says, and the words are not a question. She leans forward slightly, fingertips on the leather of the desk, as if the contact will steady what she cannot steady in his face. "It means Senator Vance has been using shell accounts tied to companies in your orbit to launder campaign donations. It means paper trails that point at him and at people who do his favors. It means we can make him brittle." He studies her. There is no triumph in the way she says it, only the crisp satisfaction of a problem recognized and named. Peter thinks of numbers and movement, of leverage and aftermath. He has seen men fall for less organized reasons. He knows how quickly a political skeleton becomes a white noise avalanche. "We make him brittle," Peter repeats, slower.
His voice is the voice that sets terms, then lives with consequences. He begins to outline, the ledger of his mind opening in small, organized entries, pressure points, allies, channels for the leak. Sarah listens, but she also tilts the conversation toward containment. "If we expose him without a strategy, he becomes a martyr to his voters," she says. "He can claim persecution, and his allies will rally. We use the information as threat leverage first. We make him choose, cover and resign, or we go public. We force his handshake." Peter's ring twist returns, a small, private tick. He watches her form plans with the coolness of someone who has practiced this kind of violence with paperwork rather than guns. She thinks through outcomes and reputations like a seamstress thinks through seams. She anticipates rips and trims them before they become visible. "Bring me objectives," he says, final. "Bring me options." She nods. "Tonight I'll draw the lines. I'll talk to Miller and Patel about the SUVs, and I want to vet anyone who gets close to the evidence. We don't leak until we control the fallout." He does not ask her why she is so skilled at this. He does not need to. 2 years of watching her stitch the edges of his life taught him not to be surprised by competence. There is something else, an affinity he has not named for himself, that is less about gratitude and more about territory. It coalesces in him like heat. Outside, rain keeps writing in vertical lines against the glass, and the city glows like a ledger of living things. Inside, a new division is quietly arranged. She will remain at his side, not in manners or marriage, but in office proximity and authority. He will formalize the liminal space she has already occupied for months. A move must have a public signal. They do not announce it with a parade. Peter is not given to theatrics. He orders that a smaller chair be cleaned and placed to his right in the morning. The symbolism is a blunt instrument in their world, and a message to every employee who has learned to map their station by furniture. He tells Jessica to prepare a public memo announcing that Sarah Jenkins has been promoted to Associate of Strategic Operations. The memo will be sterile in tone and violent in effect. Promotions in their world redraw boundaries. When the memo goes out, the office reacts in the ways offices always react to change. Some faces hardened, others softened. Gossip migrates like a current around them. Lavinia's smile sharpens into a shape the staff have learned to avoid, the smile of someone whose social currency just screamed out for recalibration. She finds Peter in the corridor, shoes click claiming the space in a rhythm that has always been an announcement. "You're moving too fast," Lavinia says, public and thin, a complaint disguised as care. Her voice holds 1,000 undertones, the expectation of entitlement, the practiced claim that she had access to decisions like this.
Peter's hand goes to his ring, and the twist is a language now. He answers without looking like he is yielding. "This was my choice," he says. The words are simple enough to be easily understood. A man who commands will let very little of his reasoning leak into the public light. She laughs, low and pained. "A secretary at your side? People will talk." "Let them," he replies. The diplomatic distance in his voice is a net. Lavinia does not push further. She cannot, not when she knows the contours of his patience. But her eyes flick to Sarah across the glass atrium, and the look has the old resentment of someone who expects to be the light rather than the keeper of it. Sarah meets the look and dares to be unmoved. There is a satisfaction in being recognized now, but she keeps measured. She has not asked for pity or for gilded favors. She has asked for a place with tools. At her desk that used to serve as a buffer between Peter and the world, for 2 years a plug in his system, there is now a new layout,
a leather chair, a lamp, a small nameplate that reads, Peter Moretti, Associate, Sarah Jenkins. The plate is a tiny earthquake. News travels. A minor social site picks up the memo and runs a quiet piece. Mysterious secretary elevated. The headline is small, but the ripple is not. A week passes in a chamber of strategic moves. Sarah's workload becomes thicker and less invisible. She receives late dossiers from law firms and analysts. She coordinates with Miller on surveillance spots. She speaks to Patel and the drivers with a language of logistics that does not always mention the word security, but implies it in scheduling. She is careful with the USB. She treats it as a living document, moving it into secure pockets, making copies only when necessary and only under eyes she trusts. Her competence, once the engine of unnoticed efficiency, becomes the engine of an overt strategy. Peter, meanwhile, moves in the world with a new axis. He is less tolerant of the casual cruelties that have passed for conversation in his circles. He intercepts a whisper from a board member about image and replies with a minimality that stuns. The men who had once measured him solely by his ability to contain discomfort now find his discomfort managed by a woman who understands the ledger as well as he does. It unsettles them. Lavinia predictably pushes. She stages social invitations that read like territorial claims, name-dropping senators and TV anchors, leaning on old habits, flavoring men with her confidence. She expects the public to accept her as the natural mate for Peter's exposure. But the world does not always run to script. Invitations fall flat when the man at their center begins to change the terms of his own life. One afternoon, Lavinia appears at the office unannounced, heels punctuating her arrival like punctuation. She strides to Peter's office with a practiced smile and the air of someone who believes she has a right to intrude.
Peter lets her in. He does not stand. He does not lower himself to the choreography of apology she expects. He gestures to a chair he has not used often, the one opposite Sarah's now, opposite both of them. He has already rerouted the narrative. Peter, Lavinia begins, her voice bringing all the old currency. I thought we had an understanding. We did, he says. The sentence hangs like a paper banner folded back on itself. He looks at Sarah and then at Lavinia, and the mix of sights is sharp as a design in black and red. That understanding has changed. She takes offense, more theatrical than dangerous. Changed? To what? To respect, Peter answers. The word is economical. He is not flattering Sarah. He is making a choice about order. Lavinia's face alters. You can't just... Watch me, he says. The reply is less a provocation than a boundary. When she leaves, the office is left with a hum of gossip softened by the awareness that Lavinia's public threats are less potent than rumor. She will find allies elsewhere. She will try to needle the senator. It is what she does. A week later, an invitation arrives, a gala at the Grand Meridian, the city's annual charity night that functions as a ledger of status for those who keep the city spinning. Senator Vance will be there, smiling in press photographs, leaning into speeches about integrity meant to distract from his own ledger. Nikolai will likely be absent. Moscow's heat may keep him home, but shadows travel, and the possibility of retribution is always near. Peter decides they will go together, publicly, not as a date, not as a spectacle to be managed, but as a unit. Side by side, he says to Sarah. In the hall, on the dais, in photographs. We show them a front. She agrees. The calculus is practical. Presence is power, and the gala will be an opportunity to measure reactions. She chooses a dress, less shock than the crimson, the strategy now matured, an ink blue gown that reads authority. Her hair is gathered this time, a statement of control. He notices the changes, small and exact, as if each were a chess move. The night of the gala arrives, and the city is a moth of light. Cameras sing as they near the entrance. The valet choreography is predictable and aggressive. The press swarm is an animal. They present themselves on the step, a tableau of a man and his associate. Photograph flashes make the world into a quilt of white light. The optics are exactly what Peter intends. Sarah at his right, visible. He at her left, guarded. Senator Vance glides forward with all the practiced geniality of a man who has made a career of being trusted. His hand is warm and over-ripened with familiarity. Lavinia glides too, a vulture in silk, wearing a smile that intends to bruise. You look radiant, Peter, the senator intones, his voice a syrup of obligation. Thank you, Peter says, and there is something in the plainness of his reply that arrests the senator's smile for the briefest second. He notices Sarah then, recognized as more than a passing accessory. His eyes narrow, not in rage, but in calculation. To him, the new constellation of their public partnership is a variable. The evening proceeds with the expected rituals, small speeches, clinks of crystal, scripted charity announcements. The guests move like constellations, pairing and aligning for photographs. Sarah keeps her hand by the folder she has placed on the inside pocket of her clutch, the USB contained within a separate case, which in turn is nested where only she can access it. She watches the senator, noting the man's gestures, the frequent phone gestures that betray a need to check messages, a nervousness that real power tries to mask. At the height of the night, while a violinist strings a thin, insistent melody, Lavinia drifts into Peter's conversation and says something slight, something meant to belittle. "I suppose you never bring the same woman twice." Peter smiles, an expression that is more like the closing of a lid than a warmth. "I don't keep women like ornaments," he says evenly. It is a small thing, but an instrument. Lavinia rettens. The senator's gaze slips. His hand finds a glass that reaches for shrinkage. He is a man wary of the light. The red tab does not need to be visible in public. The mere threat of exposure is a cut behind the knee. What they do not expect is the movement on the balcony. The room is glass-fronted and overlooks the city. Above the crowd, a balcony provides a vantage for a small group of security. Two men at the balcony edge, wrapped in dark coats, are not designed to be there for decor. They are actors waiting for a cue. For a moment, the violin's pitch does not match the air. Then a silenced crack snaps across the night like a small animal's death. It is not intended to kill. It is intended to displace. Shots land in the direction of the dais, loud enough to send people diving, to break 1,000 carefully curated images of power. Panic ripples in waves. Guests shout. Chairs topple. The violinist drops his bow. Photographers scramble. Somebody's dress tears on a fallen chair. The room is suddenly less a stage and more a swarming animal. Peter's reaction is not elegant. It is precise. He reaches for Sarah without thinking, a tethering motion that is both protective instinct and territorial claim. He directs Miller through a series of commands that are curt and necessary. Get people out, secure exits, move to service elevators. But the plan has been splintered. Smoke from a flash grenade fills the room, and the exits are clogged. Their public is turning into a corridor of desperation. Sarah's mind clarifies in the moment. Her 2-year practice of noticing the small things is operationalized. She notes the direction of the balcony men, their silhouettes against a thin strip of rain-lashed glass. She hears the direction of a shout from the service stairwell. Such shouts mean reinforcement.
She feels Peter's hand at the small of her back, a map of safety and demand. She moves with him, not behind him, but as a partner. Together they shepherd people toward a service exit that Miller has kept clear, a decision made earlier in the night as a contingency. The movement is not a how-to for viewers. It's a human swarm finding the narrow edge of escape. Outside, black SUVs are a series of patient animals waiting curbside, but the press and the crowd have clustered and made their approach messy. Peter knows their faces, drivers and men he employs, and he signals without broad gestures, small directions that try to move chaos into order. In the crush, a man lunges. Miller intercepts him with an elbow and a low curse. The lunge is clumsy, not well trained, implying hired muscle throwing their chance in like dice. It is a message more than an assassination. It is an attempt to break them publicly, to humiliate and frighten. They make it. The escape is jagged and dirty and human. Sarah's gown brushes pavement. Someone screams. Peter pulls her into the SUV, the privacy partition dropping like a door slammed between a life and a trail. He breathes hard, but the breath is not panic so much as the rush of a man who has been forced to prove something he thought he had already proven. In the SUV, dark and moving like a shuttled thought, he turns to her, and his words are childlike in their roughness. "Did that make you doubt?" She looks at him. The wet city lights smear across the window. For a beat, neither of them says anything. They taste smoke and city and adrenaline. "No," she says. "It made me certain of what to do next." He assesses the truth in the sentence. Then he leans forward, his voice low. "Stay with me." "I'm staying," she replies, and the curtness of her answer is an agreement that has the weight of a better vow, not a promise of devotion, but a promise of joint action. They drive to a refuge, a penthouse that sits like a watchtower away from the gala's smoke and cameras. Inside, the penthouse smells of warmed cedar and the sterile comfort of a place that has been prepared for storms. Peter's staff is efficient, unshakable in the face of improvisation. Miller records the details of the night and relays them to Peter in sharp bursts. Sarah sets the USB on the kitchen counter like a piece of currency. They both understand the shape of what this night has done. It has made the private very public and turned the city's attention into a weapon across which enemies can be seen. In the penthouse, after Miller leaves and the door clicks closed,
Exhaustion comes, but so does urgency. The adrenaline shifts into a quick, dangerous intimacy. Peter sits on the chair by the window and watches the city's reflection, 1,000 lights like counted debts. Sarah moves to the counter where the USB sits, and she picks it up with a steadiness that makes the object feel like a detonator and a bridge at the same time.
He watches her hands and the way her fingers close around it. He notes, with a strange sharpness, that he is protective not only of the data, but of the woman who holds it. He crosses the room in long, controlled steps and places himself between her and the counter, not touching, but owning the space. The ownership is a man-sized thing, a territorial mapping of where he will put his safety. He has not knelt, he has not batted his eyes, he has placed himself as a wall. She meets his wall with the same steel. "We use it quietly," she says. She intends to make him see the words rather than hear them. The plan is to neutralize, not to flay. He nods, then stops himself from speaking like an employer or an owner. His voice softens in a way he rarely allows. "I'm sorry," he says suddenly, and it is the most dangerous sentence he could make in their world because it has nowhere to go unless he changes the terms. She raises an eyebrow. "For what?" "For telling you to be invisible," he says. The ring on his hand glints. The confession is not framed as weakness, it's an admission that his prior framing of her life as a functional invisibility was a mistake. She considers him for a long moment. The wind pins rain to the glass. Then she steps forward and places the USB in his palm. The act is an exchange of trust. "We're a team," she says, "in ways you still have to learn." He looks down at the USB as if at a small animal he can train. He turns it over and then tucks it into his jacket. The move is intimate in a private way, a secret kept inside a garment close to his heart. Peter understands intimacy as containment. Sarah understands it as partnership and consequence. They sleep in short, punctuated turns that night, two people who share a bed but not yet the language of cohabitation. The kiss that finally takes them is not an accident of fatigue. It is a collision of exhaustion, relief, fear, and something like gratitude. It is consensual and fierce, and full of the same paradoxes that have been pulling them together: protection wrapped in desire, dominance wrapped in respect. Morning arrives thin and gray. The city's noise returns like tide. Sarah wakes to find the USB missing from the counter and lying on Peter's dressing table instead, in a stack of things that feel to her like claims and offers and danger. He is awake and watching her, his gaze oddly gentle. "Did you get sleep?" he asked. "A little," she answered. "You?" "Just enough," he says. He holds out a hand like a truce. She takes it and stands. Their touch is measured and not performative. They return to the office that morning with different roles to play. News trucks circle the building. After the gala, every camera wants the explanation. Peter fields calls with the practiced calm of a man who knows how to be blunt and not sloppy. Sarah moves through the office with a coolness that is not veneer but precision.
She knows the molecules of scandal, what gets oxygenated, what dies in the dark, what requires a name, a figure, and a scapegoat. She has the USB inside a secure device in a desk she can access only through steps that Miller and she have architected. They craft their response, a press release that is minimal, and a public appearance schedule that keeps them both visible and unassailable. They decide not to engage the press with drama. They will present facts later, not now. The strategy is to take the air out of the senator's possible martyrdom and to place the senator inside a set of choices where every option costs him something real. But the city will not be pacified by logic alone. Lavanya stirs. She is the social predator who senses the shift and pitches sharper. Her whispers move in corridors like a scent that seeks to soil Sarah. She tries to make staff colleagues question Sarah's motives, to paint her as opportunistic. Her attempts, though, do not find traction. The facts of the gala have reframed what counts as acceptable in Peter's orbit. People who once deferred now ask for tasks. In full glare, the pair make a decision. The political removal of Senator Vance is a slow process, but they will start with a private leverage push. Sarah writes a letter, carefully unsigned, a diplomatic threat. "We have documents that implicate you. Step down quietly and we will withhold release." It is inked with legalese, only a threat if backed by a believable path to publicity. Peter's people leak a rumor to a trusted reporter. There's an inquiry. The rumor sat in the press's tape like bait. Before the senator can mount a defense, something else arrives, an offer from an unexpected direction. A junior aide to the senator, terrified and practical, comes to Sarah with a plea. If the senator resigns, the aide will help build a narrative of scandal as a mistake, not a crime. Sarah listens and then measures the cost. The aide's plea is the kind of triviality that, if properly woven, will unravel a public figure with the least bloodshed, the political equivalent of cutting a wire in a machine. They accept the aid.
The senator, presented with a choice between exposure and a private retirement, chooses the latter. He whispers that he will fight, then realizing the options, he takes the quieter one. A resignation press release quietly appears in the morning's papers. Lavinia retches privately in a closet somewhere. The staff gossip is satisfied. The city has shifted. Victory in the city is rarely tidy. The senator's departure makes space for new enemies and old ones who find themselves humiliated. Nikolai hears of the gala humiliation and the negotiation that became a rip in his reputation. Rumors of it ebb into his orbit. He calls Peter, each phrase a threat and a suggestion. "This was not an accident," he says, through a translator, his voice a low animal sound.
Peter answers in the same measured tone he uses for business, calm, unmoved, a man who has no desire to make noise. "You incurred costs," Nikolai says. "I will correct them." Peter's response is not violent, it's a ledger. "Correction is expensive," he says. "So is influence." The weeks pass with a kind of tense realignment. Sarah's desk is moved beside Peter's, no longer a peripheral place but an axis, publicly. The gesture is simple and devastating. There is a photograph that runs in a dozen places. Peter at his desk, Sarah at his right, both turned toward the camera. It is the kind of photograph designed to quiet whispers. It announces a new arrangement in the power structure of the city. In the days that follow the senator's resignation, a slow peace seems to settle. They press advantages, fund small investigations that serve to reinforce their narrative, and they make a series of quiet phone calls to blunt any backlash. Sarah's name rises in the city's private circles, from mere competence to regard. Men who once patronized her find themselves needing to address her with a new formalism. She enjoys none of the adulation. She enjoys the work. Then, when the city believes itself settled and the newsroom cycles are primed for a lull, there is a fire. Not literal, a reputational ember, a smear campaign, anonymous posts and photos in the early hours, hints that Sarah's ascent was purchased, that she leveraged intimacy rather than skill. The smear has been constructed carefully, using old tropes and intimate but out-of-contact photographs taken at the gala. It is designed to undermine the foundation of their alliance by weaponizing the asymmetry of power. Peter's face goes dark when he sees the first batch of social posts. The ring twist is a metronome now. He feels it in his jaw. This is not merely an assault on Sarah. It is an assault on the order he seeks to establish. He calls for a meeting with his closest lieutenants, legal, PR, security. Sarah sits with him and listens. She finally allows herself an infuriated small laugh that is like a blade slid into a hinge. "They're playing old games," she says. "They think men like the senator can be the altar on which my name is offered." Peter watches her and sees a continuity in her expression. If she once wanted only to avoid being noticed, she now wants to be seen for the right reasons, not to be reduced to rumor. He orders a counterplay. The move is not vindictive, it is corrective. They will release a dossier of their own, evidence of the senator's misdeeds, made public in a staged release that leaves no breathing room for rumor. Sarah speaks at the press conference they call, their first public performance as a pair beyond mere photographs. She stands beside Peter and reads facts with a voice that is not theatrical, but pure and honed. She does not smolder. She shows documents, not the USB itself, but vetted copies, and points to clear transactions and signatures that make deniability expensive. The media cycles are ravenous. The smear dissipates under the weight of a better narrative, competence, and law. The city watches and learns a new rule. Power can be defended in public alliances. People who had dismissed Sarah as an accessory find it harder to do so. Lavinia grows thinner by the day, moving through the city with less ease. But peace is never permanent. A month after the press conference, Peter receives an encrypted message, a set of photos from the night of the gala altered to appear damning in new ways, with suggestive captions. Whoever sent them reproduces the old tactic of rumor, but with better reaches. The origin is murky. The effect is immediate. Board members ask questions again. Photographers camp outside their building. It is the work of someone who learned to wait, to return scarred, and to attack with fewer bullets. Peter recognizes the hand. He recognizes patterns. He sets a trap. The trap is not violent. It is to force the hand and find the mouth that speaks. Sarah helps piece together a pattern of who would benefit from pushing the senator back into the fray, who would be spared if the senator remained as a figure to be traded. They look at Lavinia and at a handful of rivals. Then Sarah narrows in on one person who stands to benefit, a media owner whose interests have been bruised by Peter's consolidation.
They engineer a leak that implicates the media owner in a minor scandal, soft enough not to ruin him, but to get him to surface and make a move. When he surfaces, he bites. He provides upmarket hosts who have the reach their antagonists expect. The smear continues, but now it is a calculable thing. Peter and Sarah prepare formally. They do not flinch. They fight the smear with public records and with private pressure. They expose the origin of the alterations, bringing forensic analysis into the light. The bones of the smear are revealed. Crafty editing, misattribution, a network of anonymous accounts. The story turns the smear into a footnote, and the attackers into laughingstock. In the hush that follows, Peter finds himself thinking of things that are not ledgers. He thinks, in the way men like him sometimes allow themselves to think, about what it means to be claimed in a public way. He has placed her at his side, and in doing so, he has invited the city to notice her. He admires how she moves through the noise with purpose rather than charm. He feels with a territorial warmth that the city is his to arrange now, with her as a partner. One night, after a long stretch of strategy and counter-strategy, they return to the penthouse. Rain has come back and sheets the windows. Light from the city picks out their silhouettes. Miller has closed up. They stand in the kitchen with nothing but soft music and the low pressure of what has been done. "Do you ever regret it?"
She asks suddenly. "Regret what?" He answers. "All of this, being seen." He turns to look at her. The question is not without stakes. "No," he says. His face softens. "I regret that I didn't look sooner." The admission is small and dangerous. She steps forward and kisses him like someone who has had to bargain for tenderness. He answers. There is consent, intensity, and a kind of honoring in it. It is not a surrender, but a mutual access to a hidden temperature. When they separate, breath mingling, he touches the back of her neck with a gentleness that has the authority of a man who has finally learned to use power as shield and not as cudgel. They move into the morning and into a rhythm that is both new and pragmatic. Sarah takes meetings, she argues terms, she files memos and signs off on payments. The city learns her name in a different way, not as a rumor in a column, but as a signature. She organizes a team composed of people who underpromise and overdeliver. Months pass, and the story of their alliance stabilizes into a new kind of architecture. The senator's departure opens vacuums that others step into, but they step in with the knowledge that the Moretti partnership is a force to be considered. Business moves in the city with the usual ruthlessness, but now with new line items. Sarah Jenkins' approval required. And yet, for all their victories, the past remains on a short leash. A drive-by attempt, not lethal, again, more message than calamity, occurs at one of their logistics warehouses. A car idles with men inside who shout threats. A tire slashed, the window broken. It is petty, rage-driven. Peter's jaw tightens again. They respond with a carefully calibrated backlash, not a public war, but an arranged show of force through alliances, a call to a businessman who owes them favors, a firm of private security companies reminded that loyalty is reciprocal. Peter gives orders that make threats costly. Sarah signs the checks. They do not escalate into bloodshed. They do what their world requires, make the attackers feel smaller than they hope to be. The months slide into a year of uneasy stability. Their partnership is now a rule. They host dinners where the agenda is business and not social mimicry. They plan expansions and defensive moves. Sarah keeps learning how men like Peter think, the ledger of risk, the calculus of favors, and she teaches him the language of visibility as a weapon. Together they construct an empire striated with public displays meant to command respect rather than simple dominance. One evening, at the anniversary of their first dangerous dinner, the night of the Crimson, they decide to throw a private dinner for people who are allies rather than patrons. The guest list is narrow, the mood is quiet. Sarah chooses a dark teal dress and wears her hair down. Peter watches as if cataloging the way she moves. There is a tenderness in his face that is private and almost shy. At the table, Peter raises a glass.
To choices, he says. To the ones that were necessary and to the ones that surprised us. Sarah clinks her glass lightly. She thinks of how the city rearranged around them, and how the events of the night are now a memory that has teeth on it, less a wound, more a scar that makes the skin tougher. To being seen for what we are, she replies. Her voice carries a small pride that is not meant to alarm, but to assert. There is a private warmth between them that is not exhaustible. It is not romance in the naive sense. It is the mutual recognition of two people who have found a combination of desire and purpose. They are partners in business and in private. The city has rebalanced. Outside their window, a paper floats past in the wind, an old article of the senator's revised image, and then it is gone. Inside, their future feels like a ledger already started, entries of plans, numbers, and the occasional small kindness. One day, as winter edges the city,
Peter announces a public move. The family of companies that bear his imprimatur will hold a press conference. Rumor mills churn. The new move is symbolic. Sarah will be introduced officially as his partner in public, associate and director of strategic operations, standing at his side as he unveils a plan to expand business in a way that emphasizes transparency and community reinvestment. It is a PR play that consolidates what they have constructed in private into a public narrative. They prepare the speech together. She reads notes and suggests phrasing. He nods and alters a sentence to be less cold. Together, the two craft an image that will be difficult for detractors to assault without looking like they attract progress. On the day of the announcement, the room is filled with reporters, cameras, and a smear of city officials. Lavinia sits in the front row with a look that has lost some of its ease. Senator Vance is not publicly present, having retreated, yet the air tastes of old battles. They step up to the podium. Peter's suit is tailored like armor. Sarah's dress is a soft power statement, a structured jacket over a silk blouse in an understated red, the color a nod to the first night, but tempered by authority. When they appear together in front of the cameras, the city sees what they have built, not merely a man who permitted a rising employee, but a partnership that binds business acumen to public face. The photograph that will be taken and run across the headlines is the same word in a different language, two people who have chosen to stand together. After the speech, the room's hullabaloo is the expected mix of compliments and questions. Reporters quip about the secretary. Someone uses the word maid. Peter's jaw tightens only once. Sarah answers a question about her role with the clarity that has become her homework. I build what needs building, she says. I don't rely on spectacle. The cameras flash as if to say, the story is told. The city eats it.
Lavinia's nose is bent out of joint, and she will recede into her orbit, but that does not matter. What matters is that the public sees them, side by side. On the drive home that night, after the cameras cease, Peter looks at Sarah across the leather of the car and remembers the first time he froze, at the sight of her descending the stair in crimson silk. He remembers the precise halt in his body, the ring twist suspended like a metronome stopped mid-beat. He remembers the cold that turned to heat, and then to something like need that had the shape of protective fury. He thinks of his earlier command that she should be simple, which now sounds like a verdict he cannot in good conscience repeat. You froze, she says suddenly, the observation casual but laden. She has remembered too. It is not a reproach, it is an acknowledgement. He meets her eyes. Do I look like the kind of man who forgives himself for a mistake? He replies. She smiles, a small, dry thing. No, you make corrections. He looks at the city and then at her. The answer he gives now is not transactional. You were never simple, he says. You were necessary. The car hums. The city blurs. Outside, the night continues its inexorable trade in light and shadow. When they arrive at the penthouse, the ritual has changed. They do not climb the stair for spectacle. They walk in as two people who have carved out a space. Inside, he hangs his jacket, and she sets down her bag. She moves to the window and looks out at the city, their city, now slightly altered by their presence. Peter steps behind her and places his hands on her shoulders in a way that is not possessive so much as steadying. You still had a choice every day, he says quietly. You chose to stay. She leans back against him, and for once there is no calculation in her touch. I stayed because I could do things, useful things with you, she replies, and because I wanted to. He turns her to face him, and their kiss is the small culmination of everything, protection, partnership, and a mutual recognition that their lives have been rearranged in a way that neither had expected. It is a kiss that is not urgent so much as decisive. It is consent given and returned. Outside, the city breathes in the night. Inside, the two stand together, visible and resolved. The boss had asked for a simple secretary and froze when she revealed herself. That freeze was the pivot of everything they built later, a business partnership built on trust, a public union of power and strategy, and a private companionship that neither of them could have predicted. If you want a continuation, if you want to see what Peter and Sarah do when the rest of the city tries to rewrite the rules, comment Team Sarah and subscribe.